In this demo, we're going to take a brief look at the interface of ArcMap, one of the pieces of software that make up ArcGIS. Before we open it up, I want you to think for a moment about what you expect a GIS software package to be like. What do you imagine interfacing with it is like? Do you type in commands? Are you drawing things on screen? Is it like using Google Maps? How do you interface with it for analyzing your data, for viewing your data, for showing it to others? ArcMap uses a lot of different interface paradigms. Some of them you're going to be really used to, and some of them are going to be brand new. And that's the point of this screencast here, is to show you which of those you'll be familiar with and where to explore for the rest of it. I'm running Windows 10, so to launch it, I can bring up my Start menu, and it's going to look a little different than what you're used to. But if I bring up my Start menu and click All Apps, once ArcGIS is installed, I'll see it in an ArcGIS subfolder under A, and I can start up ArcMap 10.3 from here. I could also type it in the search box here, and it should come up there, and that'll work on Windows 7, Windows 8, and Windows 10. ArcGIS takes a little while to launch depending upon your computer. This is a decent computer that I'm on right now, and it usually takes it about a minute. And it'll go through three phases: the initializing license, initializing application, and initializing document phase, or loading document phase. And depending upon your environment and where your license is coming from, it can take anywhere from 15 seconds to a minute or a couple minutes. So don't be worried if it takes a little while to load. Once it loads up, we get this Getting Started dialog that shows up, and it shows us templates. So first off, we can create map templates, and we'll potentially go over that later. But the thing I want you to notice here is this default geodatabase option. This is where ArcGIS by default stores data that you're working with. Any products that you're creating by default will go there, and you can specify that for the map document right off the bat. To open a new map document from here, I can click Cancel and I'll still get a blank map document, or I can click OK once I have a template selected, and it'll use that template to create a new map for me. In this case, since it's a blank map anyway, I'm going to accept the default geodatabase and click OK. Right off the bat, first things I would notice as a new user are that there's a menu bar up here. You're probably familiar with menu bars from many other applications. They're starting to disappear in newer software packages, including in ArcGIS Pro. You don't have this as much, but the classic example would be Microsoft Office has a ribbon interface. ArcMap still has kind of that classic interface where you have a menu bar with a file menu, and then you have these toolbars up here that I can rearrange by grabbing this little control and moving it to where I want. And they have all these little icons that do different things. Some of these are going to be brand new and very specific to ArcGIS, and some of them are going to be super familiar, like the save, the print, the open, and the new tools. So the rest of this interface, though, is pretty specific to ArcGIS. I encourage you, when you first open ArcGIS, to explore these menus for yourself and see what's in there, because that's going to be a way that you start figuring out pieces of the software that maybe we won't cover in this course, or that we don't cover in depth in the area that you're interested in, and to explore the toolbars too. Before we do that in this demo, I want to quickly go over the rest of the interface. ArcGIS is mostly composed of things that we call panes. So over here we have the table of contents pane or window. We can bring these up under the Windows menu in here. So if I lost the table of contents pane by clicking X and getting rid of it, I can go back to Windows and click Table of Contents, and it's going to come back up. I can also dock Table of Contents so that it goes over to the side, just like the Catalog and Search panes on the right, and then it automatically disappears for me when I don't want it, and if I hover on it, it comes back out while I'm hovered, and it'll disappear again when I move my mouse off. Or I can click on it to bring it back up and then pin it back down just like it was when we started, using that little pin at the top, that auto hide button. I can change the size of panes by hovering over them and dragging. And for those of you who really like to customize your interfaces or who have different sized monitors, you can click and drag to pull the pane off of where it is now and dock it to somewhere else. And there are multiple options for this. I'm not going to cover them all right now, but the most common ones are to just dock it to another side. And if I bring it over to this blue button here, it'll dock it to the right side there. just like catalog and search. And if I auto-hide it here, it auto-hides to the right. What if I wanted it to join catalog and search though? I can make those fly out, and they're going to be right next to each other here. And then if I tear off table of contents again and bring it to the bottom of this window, I can then attach it to the bottom there. Or I can make it another part of this by dragging it again and hovering over the pane that I want it to be in. And if I hold it over that center, there's that little icon there that looks right at the bottom like it has tabs, and that's what they are. If I attach it there, I get a tab with table of contents, search, and catalog over here, which if I pin them down, they all hide together, and if I bring them out, I get still just the one. So I'm going to put table of contents back where it started, because that tends to be where I like it. And I just tore off all three, as you can see. So I need to tear off table of contents using that bottom tab and dock it back to the left. We also, as you just saw, we have a search and a catalog pane. Catalog is a full Arc catalog window. Arc catalog is a separate application. And so we're going to go through a lot of that later, but know that there's a catalog window here. I'm going to hide it for now. And search. Search gives us local search, ArcGIS online search, and enterprise search. For now, we'll focus on local search, and this is a way we can bring up tools or data once we have them on our machine. The tools are built in, and data, as you start to build it, ArcGIS is going to index it and let you search for it. I'm going to hide that back again. And let's take a quick look at some of the menus here. What I tend to go looking for first thing when I open up a new application is I want to know what options the application has. So ArcGIS has a lot of different ways to customize the applications and ways to set your options depending upon the context of what you're doing. But the big one for the full application itself is under the Customize menu, intuitively enough, and then ArcMap Options. And if I bring that up, I get this beefy dialog full of different tabs. And a lot of the ones that you may find yourself wanting to adjust right off the bat are on this first General tab. So one thing that gets a lot of new users is the mouse wheel and continuous zoom pan tool. I personally, by default, ArcGIS, when you roll your mouse wheel forward, it zooms out. I like it if it zooms in when I do that. Some people like it when it zooms out, and so you could set that yourself. If I click apply, it'll save those settings and leave the dialog open. The other thing that we'll talk more about later is the option to make relative paths the default for new map documents. We'll talk more about what that is when we define how map documents work and what relative paths are in another lecture. But for now, I'll check that box. A few other tabs that you might want to check out are on this bottom row here. And one that I like to set is enable hardware acceleration for supported layers. If you have a decent graphics card, this is going to make certain types of layers display more quickly. So I usually set that because this computer does have hardware acceleration. And then another one to check out is metadata. I'm not going to change anything here yet because when we get to checking out Arc Catalog, I want it to show you what it shows by default. But note that there are different styles of metadata. That is the data that describes the process and the function and the form of the data that we're loading. And we can view it in different formats. And a really common one is the FGDC CSDGM metadata. Usually I select that as my metadata format. We'll select that later on in this class, but for now we'll leave it as item description. And I'm going to click OK, and that's going to save out my preferences and bring me back to the application. So one thing I haven't talked about yet though is this big white space in the middle here. Probably, given the amount of space given to it, the most important part of it. What goes on in there? That's where we view our data. So let's add some data now so we could take a look at it. And if I click this button here, I get some options for adding data. I can add data directly from my computer. I can add a base map, which is sort of like Google Maps, where you have pre-made tiles of map information that are just cartographic. They just show you information. You can't analyze them, but they provide context for the rest of your data that you've added. Or you can add data from ArcGIS Online. So I'm going to click Add Data. And I'm going to bring in just a California counties layer that I have in a geodatabase. And we'll go through how to find these later, but I'm going to bring in a counties layer. And I'll click Add. And ArcGIS knows how to draw this automatically, and it gives it some colors and some boundary line colors and styles immediately so that I can view it in this window here right off the bat. Notice what happened over in the table of contents though. I have a counties layer, and there's a lot of interaction we can do over here to specify how we want to see our counties layer. But the only one I'm going to show you right now is that I can turn off the counties layer and make it disappear. As we add more layers, that's going to be a very important function for us to explore our data. Right now I'm looking at the full extent of the California counties layer, but if I want to zoom in, I can use my scroll wheel and zoom in, and it follows where my cursor is pointing and zooms toward it. By default, you can change that in the options. Or I can use the tools up on the toolbar, the zoom in and zoom out tools, and I can click and drag to select a region that I want it to show on screen. Similarly, I can zoom out by a certain amount by using the zoom out tool. And then I can use the hand tool, the pan tool, to drag the map around just like you're used to in things like Google Maps or Bing Maps or whatever mapping service you use. And if I want to go back to see all of the layers on the map, I can click full extent and it takes me back out. One thing to note about that full extent tool though is if I have a base map layer on, it's going to zoom me out effectively to the whole Earth. And so if you're showing a lot of data that you're interested in a local area, you're going to instead want to go, let's zoom back in for a moment, and right click on the layer that maybe best represents your whole boundary and just do zoom to layer. There are a lot of options in that right click menu, right? And so that's another thing to note here is a lot of things in ArcGIS appear in right-click menus. So if you're wondering if you have more options somewhere, try right-clicking on it and see what comes up. We're going to go through almost all of this at some point in this class, but for now, know that there's that menu and you should explore it. To wrap up this interface tour, I want to show you how to add more tools to your view here. So ArcGIS is based upon this toolbar model where most of its functionality appears in these tools here. There are a few other ways to access it that we'll show you later on, but for now, know that if I right click in a blank space up at the top here, I get a menu full of different toolbars, a massive menu full of different toolbars I can add. And you'll see the ones that we have up are checked. We have standard and tools. This first one on the left here, that's standard, and this one here is tools. So there is a lot of other functionality that's hiding in here. And if you right click and bring up one of these toolbars, you'll be able to add additional functionality right away to your map document. So if I select the draw toolbar here, it pops up and it's floating. I can drag it around, and just like the panes, I can dock it up here if I want to. And so if I move it around, I'll be able to dock it. And that way I have all my toolbars in one spot. And the draw toolbar does exactly what it says. It gives me the ability to do things like creating rectangles in my view here, or add text. In practice, you mostly want to do that when you're getting ready to export a map for other people to use, but it's one of the sets of tools and it's a toolbar. To bring this all to a close, let's save our map document. A map document is exactly what it sounds like. Just like a Microsoft Office document, you're going to save it, and the things that you've done in here are going to be saved into one file that you can open and share with other people. The counties layer that I added, that's not contained in the map document. The map document just references it where I loaded it from, and so if I ship it off, we'll need to do some special things that we'll go through in another lecture. But I'll name this California Counties, and note that I used an underscore. That's a personal preference these days, but it's a legacy of when ArcGIS wasn't very good with spaces, so you might make it a habit and find that things get a little easier if you do. And save as type ArcMap document in my ArcGIS folder, which is part of my documents folder. And if I click save, I now have that in the title bar, and I can reopen it later if I want to. That's it for this demo. That's how you open ArcGIS, create a new map document, and find the tools you need in order to do your analysis and explore your data. Thanks, and I'll see you in the next lecture.